Welcome 32 it, everybody. TJ Wingard here with you for 32 Beat Writers. This is another episode of Beyond the Tape. Today I'm coming at you with 12 combine winners from day 2 of testing. That's right, defensive backs and tight ends under the bright lights in Indianapolis. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'd love to hear some of your favorite and big-time combine winners from yesterday out of the DBs and tight ends group. We got to start with Nick Emmanwori. You know, it's funny, I've been telling you on the last couple of episodes, I'm going back into his tape literally this week, and I did that on Friday, really, right before he stole the show, our second 10.0 that we've got to talk about, covering it here in our recaps, but just an absolutely electric day. Height, weight, both check out to be really, really good. Again, there's been kind of like a Jerry McChin kind of vibe with him, and I'll be honest, I still don't love the tape. I see a creative, like a dynamic playmaker who can fly to the football, fly to, intended targets. I like him in the box, I like him in the nickel specifically. I do separate rankings for corners and safeties, and then I have like one just dedicated for slot players. And that's probably where he'll be most, he'll probably be my safety too still, just because of the traits and this athletic testing that you see on your screen. And he's going to be my slot too as well. But an awesome 40-yard dash, 10-yard split to go with it, under 1.6. Love to see that. 20-yard split's also fantastic. And then you see the broad, basically 99th percentile. Are you kidding me? And then the vertical, a shade behind it. Just such an explosive athlete. And again, you see that on tape. I'm just kind of TBD on like what he is as a coverage player, but almost as like a more athletic version of Kyle Hamilton in the nickel. That's kind of intriguing to me. And then you go down to see these comps, and yeah, Derwin James, that's the one that Daniel Jeremiah has for him, which is saying a lot. I did also see some people saying Obi Melifonwu, who I liked, but that is something worth noting that does have some of the Melifonwu traits in him as well, and that's been an okay player, not quite to the level of Derwin James, but huge day for Emmanwori. He's probably going to go in the first round now. Like, I have a hard time thinking he gets out of the top 32 picks, and if he does, he's only there for a handful of spots on round 2. All right, let's get on to Darien Porter. We got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl, and and I tweeted out during our time down at Mobile, like, he's the type of corner that is impossible for me to quit. I don't know what it is, but these big athletic corners, I just can't get enough of these guys. And 6'2" and almost 6'3" really, almost 200 pounds. That's fine. I think he'll play at like 200, but probably shed a little bit of a weight so that way he can run. I had heard he was going to run sub 4.3, so 4.3 mark. I was kind of hoping it'd be 4.28. Maxwell Hairston, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but 4.3, that's still yet 99.5 percentile. That's still a great number. The 10-yard split is awesome. Sub 1.5 10-yard split. That's kind of where you see this like former receiver, explosive at the line of scrimmage. You kind of see some of that. You also see track background in him as well. 20-yard split, fantastic. Vertical's not awesome, but also bigger body guys don't tend to have as crazy a vertical unless you're Nick Emmanwori and you're 6'3" and 43.5-inch vert, which is bananas. But 36.5 I think is fine. It's just, not elite. But then you get into the broad, and that's the more elite number. So if you give me one of those two, I'm in a good spot. And then he did the shuttle and the 3-cone. And just a 5/100th of a second over Devil's 3-cone, like, that's crazy. So honestly, it's shades of Juju Brents too, who he ran a sub Devil's 3-cone, I think 6'6" when he came out of K-State, and he was this big athletic corner, good 40. But I think Porter, honestly, in a lot of ways, is like the more refined version of that, because Brent's tape was still a kind of work in progress. But Porter doesn't have a whole lot of starting experience at corner, but like, you see the interception against Iowa, against the tight end league. Like, he's just got natural instincts, and some of that comes from his background on the offensive side, and some of it is just like he's this big size speed freak. So yeah, some of it just kind of comes natural to him, and he's a great playmaker, and especially in like a zone heavy defense, let this guy play some cover 3, some cover 4. He's got the build of some man coverage corners too, so I'm fine with that. Which you see the top RAS comparisons, Marshawn Lattimore, who's like a man coverage specialist, but then Zion McCollum is kind of the other comp that I've been seeing a lot of people have for him, and I think that's a good one as well. But yeah, I think the zone tape for him is a little bit better than the man, but the traits kind of say man coverage corner. And again, he's a guy who's still new to the position, so maybe with some time the man coverage stuff gets better. But he was supposed to be a freaky athlete. He backed it up and fully hit my expectations there. So Darien Porter, another one of our big winners. Then we get to another corner in Jahdae Barron, and you'll go through here and you'll see a lot of the yellow, and the arm length is something we got to talk about here, because going back to what I said about Nick Emmanwori, is my fault, I nudged my camera. I do separate rankings for corner and then for slot. Jahdae Barron's been my number 1 slot, because I am just infatuated with the idea of this guy who's a really sure tackler, can be used as a blitzer, and has 4.4 speed, sub 4.4 speed, playing him on the inside, where also his like zone instincts can put him over the middle of the field and let him be a little bit more of a playmaker. Then and I mean, he'd still be valuable on the outside. So he's still going to be, a top 4 corner for me, probably my corner 3, to be honest with you, on the outside. But he's going to be my slot 1. And sub 30-inch arms, that's a threshold that typically says play this guy on the inside. So Jahdae Barron, and trust me, that means no knock to me. Some people are going to see that as a negative, right? I remember some conversations last year with some, big-time names in the draft community saying, yeah, well, I don't normally like putting nickel players in my top 50, but Mike Samerstil's different. I value the slot more than most. I think the slot's become the cornerstone position of an NFL defense. And I think Jahdae Barron would be a guy that, like, if you have that same philosophy, let this guy be a playmaker from that nickel corner spot. So, love the 40, love the 10-yard split, love the 20, the height, the weight, it's okay. The weight's fine. I'm actually not worried about that. And then the vertical and broad, he's not super explosive. And again, maybe that's a reason we want him to play on the inside, right? Like, or maybe that's just, he's just not going to play man press, right? Like, maybe that's ultimately our main takeaway from, an okay broad, less than ideal vertical, but still, like, it's not embarrassing, but you're probably just not going to put this guy on the line of scrimmage where he's going to have an explosive first step to keep up with some speedy receiver running down the field with him, so off, man coverage and then zone coverage by nature, kind of playing off the line of scrimmage more often than not. I think that's going to be the role here for Jahdae Barron, but I really like him in the nickel. Jair Alexander's kind of an interesting comparison here. Darius Slay, actually, I think is a very good comparison for kind of who he is as a player, too. So that's a really fun comparison. Really, it was that sub 4.4 speed that really, that was everything I needed to see. And then I want to talk about the arm length, and just in case you're new around here, didn't follow me on my YouTube channel before this, you're kind of a common with 32 beat writers instead. I value the nickel more than most, and to me, that's like no hamper on his draft stock. If anything, that kind of makes him one of my favorite players in the class, maybe a little bit more, but I know he's got a lot of fans as well. All right, let's get on to Maxwell Hairston. Of course, the best 40 time of anybody at the Combine thus far, 4.28. He said that was his goal, right? Getting the 4.2s, and after that initial run, gets out. I think it was a 4.29 on that second, and then they nudged it down to a 4.28, which he said apparently to some people there that was his goal. So fantastic stuff there. Sub 1.5, 10-yard split. Love to see that. 2.5 on the 20-yard. That's fantastic as well. The vertical, the broad, uber explosive athlete. And he was, and it's funny. I got to talk to him at the Senior Bowl, and he talked about like how he sees his athleticism, but like how it pairs with his like junkyard dog mentality. People call him Mad Max, and he like lit up talking about that at the Senior Bowl. So if you missed that interview with him, definitely go back and check it out. It's here on the channel if you're watching on YouTube. But he's a really fun guy, and he talked about I play in the nickel, and I'm kind of intrigued by that too. But the arm length says outside corner, the outside, the long speed says outside corner, and then he's got great click and close ability. And to me, that's backed up by the vertical and the broad. So he's probably staying on the outside. 5'11's not ideal. 183, sure, it's a little small, but I think it's fine. Ultimately, maybe he's a matchup guy, right? Like when you play the Eagles, his matchup's not going to be A.J. Brown. His matchup's going to be Devonta Smith, something like that. Just using that as, comparison. Like if he got drafted by the Commanders at 29 or something like that. I could see that ultimately kind of being the role that he settles into. But I also think with his athleticism, like zone coverage every corner, right? Like if the Chargers are looking to replace Asante Samuel Jr., this is a really intriguing athlete to throw into that. So just want to throw that out there. I still think he's got some dual flexibility there. Denzel Ward's a great person to have in here. Sam Shields and blast from the past. Wow, bringing back a name I never thought I'd hear once again. DJ Turner's also a freaky athlete, but a little bit on the smaller side. So I think 2 inches shorter than Hairston, at least an inch shorter though. So not quite apples to apples, but a good athlete to compare him to for sure. And then we get to Caleb Ransaw, and former Troy player, actually was at Troy, overlapping with Tez Johnson. Tez, when we were at the Senior Bowl, talked about that's really the one guy I want to go head-to-head with, just because we're former teammates. But almost 31-inch arm, so potential to play on the outside. I kind of do like him as a nickel as well. But the 40, the 10-yard, the 20-yard, fantastic numbers. Okay height, okay weight, I'm fine with all that. The vertical and the broad. So you're kind of seeing the same things. Explosive numbers with the vertical and broad. Can these guys get off the line of scrimmage? How quick can they get out of their, quote unquote stance? Get into the back pedal. And the height weight stuff's good to know. It kind of gives you a determining factor of like where you might play them inside and out. That paired with arm length will help as well. And then of course, speed. Everyone cares about speed, but really it's the 10-yard split. How quick can you get to that top yard, your top end speed? 20-yard. gives you a little bit more leeway to get to it. So some guys aren't great with the 10, but they're better with the 20. Some guys are awesome with the 10, kind of tail off with the 20. And, you can see here where, at least when you look at the composite, it gets a little bit higher ranked as we go along here for Ransaw, but still the 1.51 10-yard split, not bothering me whatsoever. Really good athlete. Let's go ahead and check out some of the comparisons. Another one compared to Marshawn Lattimore. Deontay Banks is another interesting one, but not quite as big as Deontay Banks. But really interesting player, and a guy that, I'll be honest with you, only watched a couple games of, just to kind of familiarize myself before going to the Senior Bowl, where I knew he was going to be filling in. He was kind of one of the later ads there. But now I'm going to have to go back and double check and be like, how much of this, 9.96 RES score, that's ridiculous. How much of that shows up on tape. So definitely a player I'm going to be checking back out once again. And another one of those is, Kitan Crawford. Hand up. I haven't watched Kitan Crawford, or I hope I'm saying that name right. But we're going to go with just Crawford here the rest of the way. But a 9.9 composite score, RES score, I should say. And man, just a guy that every time I looked up, I was like, that guy looks really good. And I mean, all green all day long, except for, the height. He's 5'10". So maybe he's another one of these guys who's a nickel. But Armlek says he could potentially play on the outside. 4.41 speed, 1.54 10-yard, 2.56 on the 20. Fantastic shuttle. Sub 7-second 3-cone is also great. Vertical in the broad with it. Broad 10, 10.08. Vertical 9.87 score there. That's fantastic. So another one of these guys who's an explosive athlete. Got the long speed, but you're also seeing the shuttle and the 3-cone to showcase some agility and change of direction skills there. So love to see that. And also 202 pounds. That's kind of where, if he does play in the nickel, does he have the mass to be that run defender, right? I talk about this all the time, and this is kind of where I struggle with draft analysis and guys like a Jalen Walker, where it's 3-4 outside linebacker. To me, that's kind of like an outdated thing because nickel is your new base. And because of that, you're working with one less linebacker on the field. But 202 pounds and then this athletic profile, again, I got to go back and check the tape. I don't know if the play style will match up with this, but I'm seeing a guy with enough mass and then enough athleticism to put him in the center of your defense, right, where the gravitational pull is most extreme. Put him right in the middle of that and let him be that third off-ball linebacker, so to speak. But he's also my third deep, he's my third corner. So a lot of coverage responsibilities, but also I think 202 pounds says that, hey, this guy could be that run support that you want out of that nickel, since you're dropping that third off-ball linebacker. And nickel is the new base. Here are some of the comparisons there. Trent McDuffie's actually a really good one to have here popping up on your screen. But again, you got to go back to check the tape. I love Trent McDuffie in the nickel, so we can only hope that Crawford looks anything like my boy Trent McDuffie. All right, next guy we talk about, Jacob Parish, 9.42 overall RAS score, sub 31-inch arms. I do see him as a nickel, but I think he'd be fine on the outside. I just think you get that much more out of him on the inside. He's just one of these feisty, tenacious, he is like the prototype, like Drew Phillips, sub 5'10", little guy, but nobody told him he was small. Or the fact of the matter is, he knows he's small and he's playing in a way to make up for that. But scrappy junkyard dog type for sure. So height, weight's not great, but the vertical, the broad, you're seeing explosive athlete, especially with that broad number. Love to see that. And then the 40, the 10-yard, and the 20-yard are all very, very good, 9+ rated here on the RAS score. So, again, explosive out of his stance, quote unquote stance. From the nickel is kind of what I'm envisioning, and then also the long speed to keep up with guys on the slot fades and whatnot. So love me some Jacob Parish. These were some really, really good numbers. This was kind of confirmation bias that he's this, kind of scrappy, always in the play, even at the Senior Bowl where it's it was an okay week, but he was always at the catch point, it felt like. And I think this athleticism shows that he's a good enough coverage player and he's got the athleticism to always be in the play. It's just going to come down to, is 5'9", 190 enough to make the play consistently? Cortland Finnegan's actually a really interesting name to have on there, as well as Jason Verrett, who that was kind of the thing too. Freaky athlete, could play on the outside, like him more in the nickel, always at the ball. Is he going to make a play, or does he get boxed out because of his size? All right, then we get to Terrance Ferguson, our first tight end here. 9.81 overall RAS. Love the arm length. Hand size is good. Height's solid. I think he trimmed down the weight. I think at the Senior Bowl, he was closer to 260. I want to say 255 was that number there, but I'd have to double check. But 247 to 250, I think, is a good number there for Terrance. And I actually got to talk to him on the flight down to Mobile. Super chill guy. Super, super cool guy. The vertical and the broad, really nice explosive numbers there. That's really good. And some of that, he probably did shave down some weight to be able to do that. But These are some great numbers, especially when you're thinking, 6'5", big friendly target. The vertical plays into that, right? Like this guy's going to go up and get it. If I throw a 50-50 ball or air milled it a little bit over the middle of the field, this is a guy who's got a little bit of that bailout factor to him. The broad jump too is a great number, especially considering getting out of his stance in line, getting up the field, running that seam. It's good to see that he's got that first step juice. And then the 10, 20, and the 10. I mean, the 40, the 20, the 10. All fantastic numbers there, especially that 40. I think there's like solid yak on his tape, but it's kind of because he's a big lumbersome guy and kind of hard to bring down. Doesn't really have like creativity, or even like Gunnar Helm, who did not have a great day, athletically speaking. He kind of becomes this contact balance, hard to bring down, kind of slimy, flimsy. I don't know how to describe it, but he's almost just like you can't get a hand on him because he's too slippery, and that's kind of how he continues to become a yak monster. Ferguson here, especially with the 40-yard, it's just like, yeah, this guy's just going to be 6'5", and a full head of steam. Good luck, all aboard, like if you want it, come and get it, or get off the tracks, So I think this kind of bodes well for what I see of him as a yak player, because he does every little thing well, like good route runner, consistent hands, finds a soft spot in zone. And now you're telling me, hey, like, I thought he was an okay yak player, but, double check that athleticism, man. There might be something more to be had there, too. So it's a loaded tight end class, man. And he's my tight end 5. Like, and I like Harold Fannin Jr. And he had an okay day, and the 3-cone was, like, ultimately his biggest takeaway. But at 238 pounds, you're going to have to find the right role for him versus Terrance Ferguson. I know I can get on the field, like, easily at 247, plus this athleticism, plus he does all the little things right. So he moved up one spot for me. He's my tight end 5 over my boy Harold Fannin Jr., who is still awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, he's still a great player. Still like me some Harold Fannin Jr. He's just a harder player to find a role for than I think Terrance Ferguson is. All right, let's get to Hunter Wohler, 9.55. He's another guy that at the Senior Bowl, man, I was like, whoa, this guy moves way better in person than I thought he did. And he became this really nice strong safety, box safety guy, like tight end matchup guy. Nickel slot, sure, but like really I think he fared pretty well against the tight ends down in Mobile. Good size and weight for that, right? Like this Justin Reed-esque role, who I'm actually going to compare another player to here in just a moment, but that box safety, tight end eraser, quote unquote, Grant Delpit, Justin Reed, these types of guys. I see that with Hunter Wohler. The 40's not awesome, but the 20-yard split, that's a more encouraging number, again, especially considering, 20 yards, working up the middle of the field, tight ends. Where is that middle, where are you going to be targeted in that type of matchup? It's good to see that he can get towards that top end speed that, isn't great, but still 7.5. It's not bad for someone who's a safety and a box safety at that. The 10-yard split you wish was a little bit better as well. Vertical, that's good to see. Some explosiveness right there. The broad, fine. Shuttle 3-cone really is a nice one to see through. Sub 7-second 3-cone, especially again if you're going to be this slot guy, tight end eraser. It's good to see that you have that change of direction skills there. So really impressed with Hunter Wohler. I didn't expect him to be I don't know how to say this, but I just didn't expect him to be all that great of a tester. Just didn't really see anything crazy there on tape that was like, yeah, this is going to be a guy I'm talking about as a combine winner. But here I am, lo and behold, talking about him as a combine winner. So another guy I'm going to go back and check the tape on. I watched, I think 4 games. I'm pretty sure I had 4 games of Wohler before the Senior Bowl, but it's been a little bit of time. So I'm excited to go back and check him out once more. That's what I'm doing. I'm in the middle of my safety rechecks. And that leads us into Jonas Sanker. It says free safety here, but I'm telling you, his best role is Justin Reed. Like, I see so much of Justin Reed with this guy. I don't know what it is, but play this guy in the box. Let him be a tight end / nickel guy. Because I think that's ultimately where we're going to get the best value out of him. He did have a good 40 and a 20-yard split, so maybe you do want to still say, hey, he could be an over-the-top free safety. And ultimately, this day in the NFL, there really isn't a true free versus strong designation. That's like it's not like Earl Thomas to Cam Chancellor, and even those guys would rotate. One would be Earl Thomas would be in the box, Cam Chancellor would place him over the top. So even then, it was kind of transferable. But I think that's only become more the case. And Charles Davis was actually talking about it yesterday on the combine. I don't know why I'm talking about it. Let's just reference one of the greatest, the best color commentators in the biz. He talks about how these guys mirror, right? So depending on strong side, weak side, the assignment's just going to flip, but you both need to know how to do it. So, Sanker does bring some free safety value, but I'm just saying, to me, best used when inside the box, used as this like tight end to nickel player. But yeah, again, 40-20, great. 10 yards, fine. 206 pounds, I thought was a pretty good number, especially considering he ran a 4.48. I like that in tandem with one another, especially right at pretty much 6 foot flat. And then okay vertical with a good broad. And, again, I'm just seeing an explosive enough athlete that can play in the nickel, keep up with tight ends, explosive enough to keep up with slot receivers for that matter, and also has the long speed to keep up with guys on slot fades and stuff. So I see a junkyard dog, 32 and a quarter in arm length though, maybe you don't have to play him the nickel. But I'm just kind of thinking I see the best version of Jonas Sanker when he's inside the box. So that's kind of where I'm hoping he ends up playing at the next level. Here are some of the athletic comparisons. Juan Thornhill is kind of an interesting one, same school guy, but Thornhill to me was definitely more of a free safety. So athletically speaking, I could see it. It's also cool to see Javon Holland in there. I was one of the higher guys on him. I should have stuck to my guns, had him at safety 1, but I fell for consensus think, and Trevon Merrick, who's a good football player too, ended up being my safety 1. But Holland, this guy who really good free safety, but also awesome in the box, played some nickel for Oregon too. So we're starting to see a little bit of that. I don't think Sanker's quite nearly the prospect that Javon Holland was. Again, a guy I was super, super high on. But that's kind of a fun comparison, especially when you talk about the inside the box stuff. Let's go to Zack Frasier. Big, long, athletic corner. What did I say earlier about Darien Porter? These are the guys that I just can't quit. 6'2", almost 6'3", 186 pounds. Sure, you'd like to see that a little bit bigger, but in turn, he runs a sub 4.40, 10-yard split at 1.53, the 20s at 2.55. Those are very good numbers. Vertical and broad, vertical's okay. Broad's a little bit better. The shuttle, the 3-cone aren't great. 7 seconds, honestly, isn't terrible. It's one of these things where on a composite, it's like 6'1". That's not awesome, but he's almost 6'3", and he's a certain type of corner, right? Like you see the straight line speed. To me, he's kind of like play this guy in cover 3, let this guy play some man coverage, and you should be okay. The 3-cone, I think, isn't as bad as maybe it looks there. 7 seconds is not too bad for someone as big as he is. And I mean, there's guys that size that didn't run the 3-cone, right? Like Joey Porter Jr. never ran a 3-cone. Combine, pro day. Sometimes that change of direction, the hip fluidity isn't great for guys. So the fact that he was willing to test it, and again, still 6.1, it's not terrible, especially for a guy that size. So Zack Frasier, athletic freak. I think he'll go ahead of Tariq Woolen, but partially because of, we know who Tariq Woolen is. So he definitely is aided in that. Porter definitely is going before then. But yeah, Frasier, it's going to be interesting to see. Does another team let this Woolen type fall into, the 4th, 5th round range? Or does someone take a flyer on him in the back end of the 3rd? That's going to be interesting. Or is he one of the first picks in the 4th round? So that's going to be something to keep your eye on there. But he was supposed to be a freak athlete. He lived up to the billing. Also, almost 33-inch, arms. That's fantastic, too, if you do play him on the outside. Assuming he does play on the outside. And then one last player I want to talk about, Jalin Conyers here. He's this really nice receiving tight end threat who's kind of bounced around college football, Arizona State for a little bit, ultimately finished his career at Texas Tech. And, height's not awesome. And that's kind of where, again, he kind of plays more like a slot receiver. He's kind of in the mold of Brock Bowers, Colston Loveland-ish, but a little bit toned down. But the weight's at a really good mark, and actually this is where, I'll kind of jump ahead here. That weight, 260, plus that 3-cone, sub 7 second. Shout out to Fran Duffy. He becomes the first out of 149 qualifying tight ends, 260 pounds or more, to run a sub 7 second 3-cone. That type of change direction skills is what I'm talking about at a tight end position. I was a big, Ben Sinnott riser. Later on in the process, once, I got back into his tape and saw that 3-cone kind of applied, once I knew what I was looking at, where he wins, what his skill set is, okay, now I have an idea of who this athlete is. Now I see it on tape. I'm going to have to go back and do some more Jalin Conyers. I've been waiting for him to come out, so I've watched him a few years in a row now, just kind of waiting for him to become to enter the NFL draft. So I'm fairly familiar, and I don't want to say the sub 7 second 3-cone doesn't surprise me because, again, we're talking about that. That's kind of historic here for someone that big. But, I mean, you kind of see that on tape. That's where he excels, right? Running those seams and then kind of change direction, snapping off routes off of that. Vertical, broad, also really solid numbers. Explosive athlete out of his stance. Love to see that. So while the 40 is good, not great, I think all the other athletic testing here kind of makes up for that. You also wish the 10-yard split was a little bit better. It's still not bad. It's just in that good range where you wish it was elite. But vertical, broad, and plus the shuttle and the 3-cone, those are the numbers that are selling me on Jalin Conyers. So this tight end class gets that much deeper, and honestly, once you get past that top 6, Jalin Conyers here at tight end 7, I don't hate that whatsoever. Just haven't finalized those rankings, but you get to the back end of the 3rd, early 4th, where a lot of those big names are gone. I'd be willing to take a shot on one of the older guys in this class, but also, that 3-cone, man, he's going to separate. He's going to get open. So, plus 260 pounds, you can play him in line. He's a fine blocker. It's not really his strength, but he's willing, and at 260 pounds, he's mostly able to do that. So, Jalin Conyers, that's going to do it for our Day 2 recap of the NFL Scouting Combine. Let me know who are the winners that you thought I should have included in today's video. And ultimately, of these 12, who do you think made themselves the most money? I'll go with Nick Emmanwori. can't see him getting out of the first round now with the day he had yesterday. So love to hear your thoughts. Whether you're watching on X, just reply back to this post, or you can DM me on X at TJ Wingert, spelled Wengert, or feel free to leave us a comment here on YouTube. Would love to hear your thoughts, and I'll be sure to get back to as many comments as I possibly can. But that's going to do it for us. Be sure to come back tomorrow when we do our Day 3 Scouting Combine recap. That's going to be quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers. So that's going to be a very fun video to talk about. And because of how many guys are going to be participating and how many guys are going to be blowing it up, tomorrow's going to probably be at least 15 names, probably closer to 20 to be honest with you. So definitely come back tomorrow. That's going to be a fun video to break down some of those biggest winners from those 3 position groups. But until then, my name's TJ, and we are signing off.